We can get started. Good to see everybody today. Week 5. Um, yeah, 5 in, 2 left. And so we kind of laid it out early on. Like our goal for a lot of this was talking through biblical principles. So our goal was really to kind of move through a lot of like basic biblical principles. And then we kind of left a lot of crazy bins for the last 2 weeks, I feel like. One of my favorite dad jokes, notice I say my favorite, not everybody else's, but like when we get in the car to go somewhere and the kids are like, "Where are we going?" I always say, "Wherever the wind may take us." And they, one, don't get the reference, and two, don't appreciate it. But I kind of feel like the last 2 weeks kind of may be like that. So hang on a little bit. We're going to talk over some biblical principles of parenting. And we're also just going to talk a lot of non-convictional stuff. Like, here's some things that worked at our house. Here's some things that didn't. And I say non-convictional very intentionally because a lot of these items that we're going to hit, we just want to say, here's some of what we did so you can hear it, process it, decide for yourself whether something's helpful out of there or not. But the end goal in all of this has really just been to encourage you to think about your parenting, to be intentional with it, to not just kind of sway as you get there, but spend some time in thought about it. So last week, to kind of cover where we were, we talked a lot about discipline last week, talked about what that looks like specifically in our house, but just kind of the basics of correction and laying out an expectation for your home, laying out some consistency for how you parent with your kids, and talked about weaving in between, like being heavy in communication in the relationship, like talking through issues, challenges that you're having, things that you want to work on with them, but also not forgetting to teach consequence in that. Of like, hey, we want to communicate and talk through the issues that you're having, but we also don't want to save our kids from little consequences in little ways so that they can learn that as well while those consequences are small in their life and they're not growing as they age. Talk through just setting that tone of what obedience is. For us, it was obey without challenge, without excuse, and without delay, and just an acknowledgement that there are patterns that we all might fall into. If you wind up just evaluating what you've done over the past few weeks, like have you fallen into a pattern of just yelling at everybody, right? And thinking about, well, if you set the tone in your house of like, I calmly ask you to do something and you don't do it now, then I slowly escalate till I yell and then you have to do it, then you're setting the expectation of you don't have to do what mom and dad says till I yell. Similarly, while we chose not to do the counting thing, because I found if you count, then our kids learn, well, I don't have to do what dad says until he gets to 5, more likely 6 or 7. So it was, for us, it was, hey, we're not going to do the count. If dad asks you to do something, the expectation is now. And with all this, in first 4 weeks, we've been heavy on communication and talking through discipline. I just want to take a pause from there before we dive in today and just a moment of encouragement. Like, we've laid out a lot of good stuff to do, and the end of this is not to discourage you, for you to be like, I'm not doing this well, I'm not doing that well. Like, no, it's just really about you thinking about areas that you need to work on, watching how your kids are growing up, and think of, hey, maybe there's some ways we need to adjust how we're dealing with this issue or that issue with your kids. And look, you all know us, have lived with us, seen us well. You know we are far, far from perfect parents.
Yeah, we are certainly not doing all these things well either. We're working toward them.
I was laughing when I saw the Browns come in because I think the first time that we met them was out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. They went camping with us. Yeah, no, I intentionally set that up weird.
We ended up camping together. We
Yes.
met each other on a campsite.
So, and I think that trip, yeah, that one wasn't the one where our kid threw a rock and busted somebody's face, but they did get a rock in somebody's eye. So, like, we've been through, see, they don't even remember this. They don't. It wasn't your eyes.
Yeah. It was our kid doing the throwing, so we remember. Yeah.
But, we enjoy it for acknowledgement of of the lack of perfection in all of us. There's a need for grace, not only for our kids as they go through these things, but for us as parents. As we were prepping for this class, I think at the kitchen table one night, I was like, all right, I want you guys to think back of some things that mom and dad say to you all the time that you're like, these are the things that I'll remember. And I mean, I'm like, I've dropped some good nuggets of wisdom around this place. And so we open up the floor.
This is the legacy we've left.
This
here.
is it. We open up the floor for comments like, so what's something dad said to you a lot that you'll never forget? And without hesitation, the first response was, pull my finger. So, lovely legacy we leave. But we're going to talk next week about having fun. Like, have fun. Know that the little years are hard. They're tough. There's a lot to think about. Don't be discouraged. And I feel like sometimes as parents, we can run through cycles of kind of guilt in this, where you're like, okay, I'm not doing this the way I should. This kid is really struggling with this. I'm not finding improvement. And you just like, it's overwhelming, especially when they're really teeny and they're toddler age and there is no stopping from constant movement, hands constantly grabbing things, constant moments of correction. I feel like especially for the mamas, it can feel like a tough cycle that you get in, and then you talk to some older, well-meaning woman, and she's like, just enjoy these days, you're gonna miss them. And you're like, for the love of goodness, I would like to miss them on occasion. Like, it's okay. Like, that feeling is a normal feeling to have. We go through cycles of that as parents. But the encouragement here is just have some grace for yourself as you work through this. Think about the things to work on. Don't get stuck in a cycle of feeling awful about what you're doing and just live there. So with that, we're going to talk about, really kind of hit three main things this week. We're going to talk on work and rest. So we hit on those a little bit, but just how to kind of talk through some work ethic ideas in our kids, why that's important. Talk through rest, both for kids and for us as parents, and then talk about tech for a little bit. And again, we're going to lay out kind of what we've done, mistakes that we've made and had to correct, and then a little bit of just some resources to use to think through tech in your house, how you let your kids have access to that, what you want to foster, and the things that you want to, steer clear of for a while. So with that, let's dive in. Start with work and rest rhythm. And I think that, this is an area I joked earlier about the Instagram special. I think work and rest is definitely one of these. Culturally, we see two hard pushes. It seems like every issue right now, we see increasing polarization of sides of issues, and work and rest is one and the same right now. I think you'll see some people who are like, you need to drive, the Musk version, like you need to work 120 hours a week or you're not doing anything. Then on the other hand, you have others in the parent circle who are like, you just need to chill out about everything.
More self-care.
More self-care. Self-care is everything. So I think you think about the guardrails and where not to fall off the road. We're on either side. So I think there's value in thinking about both, how we instill some work ethic in our kids and also how we set up our home in rest rhythms as well.
Yeah, it's funny when you mention the Instagram or whatever reels you're scrolling through. You are likely being fed by that algorithm, whatever it is you're thinking. So it is absolutely, the polarization is true because you're being fed that far end of your spectrum. I love the word rhythm when we think through things that we're instituting in our home, and I love thinking through work and rest rhythms in our home. Understanding with that we are not going to stay completely consistent with things all the time, but we want our home to be characterized by certain things, right? Before we go any further, I want to commend a book to you. There's a book called Habits of the Household, written by Justin something Early. I don't remember his middle name. Super good. I read this book a few years ago, liked it then. I went back this week and perused it in thinking through some things for today, and I loved it this time. he really does lay out some really practical God-honoring rhythms to institute in your home. Some of them, like if you weren't here last week, he does go through some disciplinary rhythms. He goes through screens. He goes through work and play. And it was really helpful. Honestly, he's saying a lot of the things we've said in here in just a much more eloquent, understandable way. So yeah, if our gobbledygook doesn't make sense, that book was really helpful to me. Yeah, so we already spent some time within the last few weeks thinking through work. We talked about holding up the importance of hard work to our kids, but I want to go back and spend a little bit more time there. Yeah, so we remind our kids very often that the idea of work was a pre-fall idea. God created work as part of creation. We talk about things we want to say to our kids. It is totally fine and honestly preferable to just open up God's word when you talk about these ideas with your kid. Sometimes we cannot find the ways to say things, but God has already given it to us. So you can literally open your Bible with your kids and just read what it says. So Genesis 1:28, this is God speaking to Adam and Eve. And God blessed them. I know we're dropping into the story here. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So we can point out to our kids that God put Adam and Eve in the garden to work it, to have dominion over all the other living things there. And then we literally just walk our kids through the fall. What happened? And we can point them to the consequences. So looking at Genesis 3:17. "And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return." So we point out to our kids that Adam and Eve were supposed to be cultivators of these things God had created. They were supposed to sow seeds. They were supposed to be fruitful, literally, with the creation they had been given and with creating more people. And it really wasn't at all until after the fall, until after sin entered the world, that work became a hassle. Work became hard. So God's good idea of work is now distorted for us. And it will be for our kids, and you'll see it when you try to teach your little kids that this good idea of work is marred and it is a hassle for them. So, but because of Jesus, work can be redeemed, right? And we can show that to our kids as we teach them how to work in the home. We've got to model that. So it's our job to model it and to teach them what good work looks like.
So, kind of getting to the practical piece of it, what that looks like and has looked like in our house, like we would just encourage you to think about, hey, make them grow up just not even knowing a time when they didn't help out around the house. And that's something that's worked well for us early on. It's like, no matter how small they are, teach them to do the little things that they can to have real value in help and doing things around the house. And I think for us, the things I admitted, we talk about things we don't do well. I'm not a list person at all. Like, I'm not good at like creating a list or long-term holding to that. So like for us, it wasn't really, we may have had short bouts of a season where we did some list around the house that's really organized.
Like assigning things to them, is that?
Yeah, like assigning, you do this every week, not long. And again, this is a little early in the conversation, but like on the allowance front, I know people do allowances for chores and work. I'm not saying I'm opposed to that. That's not something that we've
just never done it consistently.
Dove into. For us, we chose to really set the expectation early on, like, hey, as a member of this family, like, you have roles to do things around the house and work. And we started that as early as possible. And I would think, I'd kind of divide this conversation almost up into two ways. And I think one is kind of the organic take care of themselves piece, because I think often we can, and I know this is a trap we've fallen into in seasons, we're encouraging communication, spending time with our kids. But sometimes we dive into like helicopter parent mode because they're around all the time. So you're like, you want to do everything for them. So you wind up cleaning up all their messes or solving all their little problems throughout the day and not encouraging them to kind of grow up and handle things on themselves. And a confession where we had to make some corrections, and we still do, is that like we were really intentional with that with like kid number one. Like, yeah, he's great. He can do everything, like oldest kid syndrome, right? Like, he might come home and cook lunch today. Like, that would be, that's the older kid thing. And then each kid down.
Nobody else has to do anything.
Yeah, each kid down, we've had to think more about, because the older one, being the most helpful one, being the most capable one, will wind up doing a whole lot of stuff. And then we're like, hold on. Next one in line is like, if I just drag my feet long enough, he's going to do it. So that for us has been something that we've had to think through a lot. We're still thinking through. But, for you all, as yours are little, think about the little things that they can do for themselves. Just to kind of list a few off the top of my head. It's like for us, cleaning up after after dinner is a big thing. At the bare minimum, like, hey, you're going to wipe off your area. You're going to dump your whatever leftovers you have in the trash, and you're going to get your plate to the sink. And then we've had to transition from sink to dishwasher, but just little ways like that. Take care of your own stuff. Cleaning your room, cleaning up your space in your room. It can be a lot easier for mom to do that in 2 minutes when they're little. But think about strategically how to use that to teach them to work, take care of their own place. In terms of just also, I would say, and we've had seasons where we wrestle with it, but I think for moms, it can fall into moms can do a lot for the kids, and you can quickly wind up with burned out mom and like a kid who expects everything to be done for them.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly you can go from, I'm doing this because I love you and I want to bless you, to, I'm doing all of this for you all. No one else cares about this. Well, of course they don't, because I've been doing it. Yeah.
So again, it's a practical piece just to think about where you can fall off the road into a ditch of over helping. Little ways for us little things that we did early on that I'm really happy we did. One of them, a simple one, was like getting them to shower completely by themselves. Like shower and get ready for bed. I think it's been harder with long hair, when we had long hair, but for the boys especially, by 6 or 7 years old, to be able to say like, go take a shower, get yourself ready for bed. Like, that is a little thing that we learned, honestly, we learned that from somebody else. Like, somebody else is like, we did that with our kids. We're like, okay. And, that was a big game changer. And so think of little things like that in your house that you're like, okay, can we set them up now to start doing that themselves and teach them things in doing that. With that, to Heather's point, what she talked about, I mean, having conversations about the importance and the value of work with them, and then transitioning, not just, working on things that they need to do themselves, but then actually like serving the house as a whole. So for us, as they've aged, we talked about the little things, cleaning their room, putting their dishes up. As they get a little bigger, especially for the boys, we moved to a lot of outside tasks. Like, here's some things outside that you've got to do. It might be picking up sticks in the yard, like whatever it is. And as they get even older, one of the things that I value so much about living as a community of believers is there's a ton of opportunities within the church to get them to not only work and serve. And I think I love our Serve Frankforts, because that's such an easy opportunity for any age to like get your kids out and serve in the community and talk through what that looks like. I'll say we had some fascinating conversations, I think the last Serve Frankfort, in that it took my kids a long way to like connect why we were doing work at the school with like serving the Lord and bringing glory to Him in that work. Like that connection, although I'm thinking, well, this is an easy connection. As I talked through it to them, I realized it was a far connection. But talking through and building through both why we do that, and actually, the value of hard work in that. So take advantage of those opportunities. I would say also, non-convictional. What?
Okay, no, here you go.
there's value in, and what's been beneficial for us is extremely intentional, letting them hear voices that aren't yours related to a lot of these things, and take advantage of that here in Buck Run. And I think of just like the little ways, like I'm looking at like the O'Daniels, like they offered up an opportunity for Parker to help out with some animal feeding at their house, and it was a great opportunity that they did for him, and it allowed him to have something that was specifically his to do, some responsibility with that. And I know that there are tons of ways that happens, and even as I'm looking faces here, I'm seeing that. And so the opportunity is there in living in a community that way. If you're tied into the Serve Frankforts, the community groups, or just asking around as your kids get into that older group, think of ways for them to be around other adults in the church who drive them towards both hard work, but just gospel-minded hard work.
Yeah, I think the last Serve Frankfort that we did, our family ended up kind of spread out. We were at one of the elementary schools, and it just so happened that Parker ended up working with Richard Black, and he landscaped a whole area with him. And it probably would have been something I wouldn't have thought he could do, but he did it for Mr. Black. So that was really good. A lot of people have asked me, and this is off topic, I'm sorry. A lot of people have asked, like, what do I do with my kid all day long? Like, especially if you have kids that are not in school yet, like, what does the day look like? I know we play, I know we eat, I don't know how to not watch TV because I don't know what else to do. And a lot of these things are things we can be doing. I don't know if it's helpful to think through certain age specific chores, and Paul mentioned a few. You can go online anywhere, and I did when my kids were little. Like, what are things that my 1-year-old can do to help me around the house? What are things that my 2-year-old can do? Not just to have busy work, because our kids will know if we're giving them busy work and it's not really producing any helpfulness in the home. I hope you're okay if I go back to that. But
No, circle back.
yeah, our little ones, littlest kids, they can put books back on the shelf. They can put their toys away. They can move their laundry to the hamper. Again, even though it's so much easier for us to do it ourselves, they can move laundry from washer to dryer. They can match socks. They can put things in the trash. If you have a tiny little one, they can bring you diapers and wipes. That was one of the first things I think that Parker did for us in the house that was helpful. They can stir your ingredients. Yes, it's a mess. Kids are messy. We just have to live with it. They can empty silverware from the dishwasher. They can feed the dog. Setting the table was one of my kids' most favorite chores that they had when they were little. We have a picture, I have it somewhere still, of the first time Parker set the table all by himself, and it is such a mess, and it was so cute, and he was so proud. And then as they get a little bit bigger, those chores expand a little bit, right? I say chores. I don't know that we actually use the word chores in our house. Sometimes we say jobs. They can start to straighten up their bed. They can tidy their room. Ours will clear and wipe off the dinner table. They can put things back in the refrigerator, empty the dishwasher all the way, bring in the mail, take out the trash. I wrote down clean windows. We just never clean our windows in our house, so I don't think mine have actually done that. Yeah, pick up sticks. There are things outside that can be done, but it is helpful to think through practical ways that they can help, and we set that up as a privilege that God has placed us in this family, and we all get to play a part in how our home functions. That's not to say that our kids love doing everything they do around the house.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd add, and then we'd transition out, but I'd just say, the spending time with others is important. And I joke too far. I'm like, every little boy needs to go work with an old grouchy man and get yelled at a couple times. And Heather's like, but no, I mean, it's true. But there's a piece of like getting out with others and doing work and having an expectation and laying out. And I know, I'm sure like many men in the room, some of the times I remember most growing up, the lessons I learned were out working with somebody and messing up and learning to work through that and bearing responsibility for it. So there's a piece of that, both living in community and teaching the value of work that matters so much as they age. And I would even say, just like dads, just take one with you. Like, you're going to do something. For me, that's something I've tried to do. I realized quickly I can't always get stuff done if I take 2 or 3. But if I could take one, like I take one and just go do whatever it is. Mine have somehow found great joy if I wake them up early to go do something, because that feels special. It just being woke up early to go.
Stay up late to do something.
Or if they get
one of those. Yeah.
Either way. But just if you're going to do something, take one with you. But.
Yeah. So just like anything else we've talked about, we could fall on either side of this guardrail, right? We are so lazy, we don't teach our kids to work hard. We can also work too much, right? We can be workaholics. We can even work doing good things. We can serve to the point where our family is run ragged. In those little years, like we all know, you cannot understate the pure exhaustion of it, especially if you stay home and you're with your kids all the time. There is just an exhaustion that is there. So we like to teach the principles of work and rest hand in hand in our home. And we, as much as we talk about good hard work, we also talk about building in margins for rest and for downtime. So, and that doesn't necessarily have to mean we're kicked up, watching the TV, but a lack of busyness is more what I'm talking about. So just like work, we teach our kids that the rhythm of rest was instituted by the Lord in his good creation, pre-fall. So we point them back to the creation account. We teach them that God is independent, self-sustaining. He does not need us for anything, and he created us as dependent, needy creatures. God does not need to rest, but we do. We point out to them that God created time, right? He gave us a certain amount of time for the day, and that means that we are equipped and able to accomplish what it will take to honor him in those hours of the day. So we need to work hard. We also honor restful time. If we flip forward to the New Testament, we see all throughout the Gospels that Jesus is giving of himself physically, exhausting himself, but he also emphasizes coming away for rest. Here, there's one instance in Mark 6. Says the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. They had been working hard. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." Countless examples of this hard work and margin for rest rhythm. So like anything else we've talked about, we've got to look at ourselves first. We can communicate whatever we want to our kids, but they're going to look first at what they see in us. So we assess, how am I doing in this? There was another class, I didn't tell you I was going to say this. There was another class a couple years ago coming right out of COVID that Chris Parrish taught called Zeal Without Burnout. And it's based on a book by Christopher Ashe, really short read. It's a good, quick, easy, accessible. I think it might still be like free on Hoopla, on your Hoopla app. But this class was about like pouring ourselves out for the Lord while also being wise about our margins for rest. And coming out of the pandemic, our minds were there, right? Because we were all too busy before we got rid of everything, and we were all at a reset point. And that class and that book were impactful for me in thinking through what we are modeling. And are we actually living this rhythm that we're trying to tell our kids they need to live?
Yeah, and I'd say for us, like we both fall on the more active spectrum. So I'd say we struggle more with like setting a rest rhythm. I'll get it.
Okay.
Instead of like we don't do as good as that at that. Boy, I'm struggling with this.
We are go.
We wind up going crazy until we hit a burnout mode, and we're like, it's all too much. Like. That's the ditch that we know we fall into, that we have to try to cycle through, and try to set some boundaries both for the kids and for ourselves on, okay, if we're scheduling, we're over scheduling, over, just overdoing everything. And, that's a piece that is really for the later years. But it's just a reminder to all of us that we all have complete control over our schedules and our busyness level.
Yeah.
Like we have the decisions. Yeah.
I'll just add that our tendency is to be busy at home. So I'll find myself being like, no, I don't have time to play that game with you. Like, I'm at home. I'm not out and about doing things, but I'm busying myself with sometimes unimportant things when rest can include just spending time and building relationship with our people.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to talk some more about that next week, specific ways like to, as a family, just chill out, do fun stuff, make memories, and kind of hear other thoughts and ideas of what you all do. But in terms of rest and teaching that individually, again, I feel like every one of these sections now, Heather started out and read some of the convictional pieces of this. I feel like asterisk around all of this because this part is very much non-convictional. And I know it's going to look very different for everybody, and people have strong feelings about a lot of what I'm going to touch on next. So take that caveat, right? I'm just sharing what we did on this piece. But for us, very early on, we taught even at the youngest years, like how to be able to be by yourself and rest and entertain yourself, and an expectation that you can't just yell mom, 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 dad, dad, dad all the time. Like there are going to be some times you need to be able to chill by yourself. So what did that look like? I mean, even earliest years, from a little bit of playpen time, here's a specific amount of time, you're going to chill by yourself right here, but you need to learn to kind of play and do on your own, from blanket time to, as they age, to like some room time. For us, we're we're all a doors open house, but like, hey, your room door's open, but there's some time you stay in your room, you do your thing, and you just chill for an hour, and that's a rest time. We often do that in afternoons on Sunday afternoons. On occasion, we'll be like, it's quiet hour, just everybody chill in your space for a little bit, rest and relax. But teaching that rhythm, I feel like, matters so much for our kids, especially as they age. And you'll kind of get in those phases, and we've had each kid hit that phase where they couldn't be entertained without us, or they felt that way. And so working through that and cycling of like, okay, here's some independent time you have to completely entertain yourself. And again, this is the piece where I feel like people have ultra strong feelings about, but sleeping arrangements at the house. And again, I'm just going to share what we did, and I would say for us right now, I would say it's one of the best things that we really invested in with our kids for both our marriage and our exhaustion levels, is we worked really hard on sleep training when they were really little, and working on them being able to go to sleep on their own and stay in their own bed. And look, I'm not telling you we never had monster challenges with this. We absolutely did, with every kid at different ages, working through some now. But just we kind of constantly worked with them, like sleeping in your own space, and being able to stay asleep, stay in your room if you wake up. And as they aged, that has been giving them tools to, all right, if you're freaking out at night, let's kind of talk through that. Let's go back to your bed and stay in your bed. And mom and dad are 20 feet away. There's just a little wall in between us. Like, we're right here. You're okay. But working through those sleep issues and getting them to stay in their room, stay in their bed.
I'm laughing because I would love to tell you, if you still are in the little years, I would love to tell you that if you put in the investment to sleep train, that they will forever sleep well. Turns out there are new challenges along the way. We've experienced, obviously there are special circumstances like sickness, things like that. We've experienced 2 sleepwalkers, so that's new and fun and ongoing currently.
We got some good stories about that. I don't know that I should share them on video.
We can't video those. We'll tell you another time. But the truth is, like, the expectations that we set, and again, there's freedom in this. Our expectation that we set with our kids was, you sleep in your bed, in your room. And yes, we did this from really, really tiny. And if you need something, here are the things you may come to us for, unless you're out of your mind sleepwalking, because that changes things. And then the goal is to get you to a point where you can get back to your bed, because this is good for all of us to rest well. Again, special circumstances aside, that has set an expectation for in the early days with what they can expect now if they wake in the night.
And I think the encouragement that I would say is like work through the issues. If that's your chosen path, for us, the value in working through that issue, keeping them in their bed and learning to go to sleep has been huge. For us, what's that look like over the years? I think one of those little glow lights in the morning was trendy for a while, of like it turned on at a certain time, a wake up clock. I was too cheap to pay for one, so we put a lamp on a timer. And it was like, hey, if you wake up early in the morning, that's cool.
Yeah.
You stay in your room and play quietly until your light comes on. Like that, that was one. The morning bound. The evening bound, I'm a little embarrassed to say this. Hopefully our 12-year-old doesn't hear, but like ours still go to their bed at 8 for all of them. That's been kind of like where we've stayed. With that said, now that they're older, you're in your bed at 8, but you have your nightlight area and you can read. And now 9 on the weeknights.
They read, and then we stagger their lights out times. So the youngest one gets a little bit of reading time. The oldest one gets a lot of reading time.
But and I say, why has that been so important to us? I think because it's allowed a lot of rest for us on both ends. So I confess I'm full old man mode, like I'm there. If we put them to bed at 8, we know we've got 15 minutes or so before. No.
We try to push to 9:30. We don't always make it.
It gives us time in the evening to do a few things around the house, to spend time together after that, to know we've got a couple hours, and then I get up really early. So then I know we've got a block in the morning to do our own things, but that's kind of, that rest schedule for us has been enormous, especially as they age. We're obviously getting ready to navigate the stage where one of them, that's probably not going to work anymore. Probably past that, but having to stretch that. But when they're little and you can, I would offer that up as a potential, because for our marriage especially, just knowing that we've got a block of time together every evening.
Yeah, we've never been good about date nights. We've just not. But we have always had our evenings together. So that's made a difference for us.
Yeah.
All
night fishing does. I fish most of the time in the dark.
That's true. Yeah.
But anyway, I think that one's been a huge part of our family and that rest cycle for us. And I'm going to say a few things out loud that we all know, but just like a reminder, because we get busy schedules, because we go do things with friends, not saying stop doing them, but just an acknowledgement for us, like exhausted kids are not going to be able to follow directions well the next day. They're going to have focus issues. Set your kids up for success just like you set yourself up for success. We know it. We all know that. But it is a challenge to keep it in mind as we're going day in and day out and passing from activity to activity. I would just add, as we talk about rest for us as parents, confession, for me, and speaking to the dads in the room, it depends on, the given week, what I have to do for personal rest. This week, I'm a federal worker. If you've been reading the news, I'm useless, worthless, and should be fired. So it's been a stressful week at work, past few weeks, dealing with people who are worried they're going to lose their jobs every day. So for me, I recognize this week, like there are times Heather knows I've got to have I got to have a separation time between work and home where I have to intentionally get out of that mode. And I feel like for dads, whether it's physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion from work, like think about how you take the breath, because I think for us, we deal with it in a bin of ways. One, it just never leaves. So your mind, you're home, you're physically there, but your mind's stuck in work stress, and you're kind of absent. Or you get the short-tempered mode. I know I wind up hitting there of like, Heather's like, hey, everything is like an urgent demand, like no yielding here, like everything all right, like you can get in dictator mode of like, get it done now. Like
Does not talk like that to them, so you know. You do not.
even the bad days. Maybe not that loud. But anyway, so like you get in that mode, you fall in the absent mode, you can fall there, or like we confessed we have challenges with, you just go home and you work on something else to clear your mind, and you're absent because you're working on this thing. So just think about, for dads, like find time to get your rest, to transition your mind, but think intentionally through, like, are you able to make that mental transition when you get home, to when you are home, to focus on who's in front of you and what's going on and think about it.
Yeah. You spoke to dads. I'll speak to moms for just a second. Especially in those little years, a lot of us have chosen to spend some extra time at home. Even if you do work outside the home, you come home and you're even more spent, really. My encouragement is to put some plans in place for rest before you reach your maxed out point. We all know where that is. We all know what that feels like and how often we tend to get to it and what circumstances lead to it. What we don't want to do is go, and serve until we blow up or break down. Because I would say we all have mom friends who have either blown up or broken down if we haven't ourselves. So this is not a guilt cycle. We don't want to go until we're exhausted, we are touched out, we can't look at them anymore, and then we've got to get a minute away. We're desperately saying, I need now to go somewhere, and then you feel terribly guilty about it. We've got to put those rhythms in place as well before we get to that point. It took us a long time to find a good balance, and we're not perfect now, but it would be in those little days when I was home with the kids I remember calling him at work one time and saying, I'm gonna freak out. I can't, I'm so tired, I'm so frustrated, I just need you to come home from work. And he did. He came home. I don't know if you remember that. It was on a snow day.
I don't remember that.
We had the two little boys, and I knew then, we can't go on like this. I've got to know when I'm getting to that point of blowing up. And so now I'm able to say, hey, I need you to know I'm fine, but I'm starting to feel, and this is what our conversations really sound like, I'm starting to feel pretty overwhelmed. Within the next week, can we plan some time for me to go do something on my own? Because in the early years, I would struggle with some resentment toward him because he wasn't just offering it of his own accord. Well, he didn't know. He didn't know until I got to blow up point. And so what that will look like is maybe even I just am going to go sit on the back porch by myself for an hour because that's all we can get. I have driven to a parking lot and just read for a couple of hours for a morning. If we've had no money for me to spend, I'll just go walk around and look at things somewhere where you can just sort of tune out and not be in full demand. So we've got to recognize that cycle. Also, it is okay not to be super mom. She does not exist. You might think you see her on your social media feed, but she does not really exist. So we as women especially have to be very careful to not lean into that comparison that we see. We're gonna feel like we need to bake the sourdough, to hand stitch the sweaters, to buy the newest wet, dry vac that will pick up all the, pet whatever off the floor. All those things are great. So we've got to be wary of that we're not feeding into that and letting our hearts look for contentment in something else. No one does everything. I have a friend who appears to be put together, and I talked to this friend many years ago, and she said, hey, don't be fooled. No one does everything well. We all have things that we're going to excel at and ways that the Lord has gifted us, but we all have other things that we're letting fall aside. And that is true for everybody. I had to give myself a little reminder this week about the comparison game. Within the last week of school, we had the 100th day of school. And you know what that means, right? We're staying up late, hot gluing 100 of something onto a t-shirt. I don't know. Anybody else done those things? Yeah, if you haven't, you probably will. I will admit I have every year up until now glued 100 of something onto at least one shirt, up until the kids are like,
No more than 50 of which have stayed on the shirt for the
oh,
day.
it's so fun
You're
to
welcome.
see how many balloons they come back home with at the end of the day. Until the kids have been like, I don't really want to wear the 100 things. Well, this year, I straight up forgot. I did not realize it was the 100th day of school, and you can guess which of the three little ones woke up and was like, where's my 100-day shirt? I do not have one. I'm so sorry. Oh, all my friends are going to have it. I'm really sorry. I love you. You're going to have fun anyway going to school. I literally had to issue myself a verbal out loud reminder, and I said it to Parker because he was in the car when I was contending with this. I know, my cord is wild. I said to him, I'm so thankful that the true measure of my motherhood is not the 100-day shirt. I'm thankful that the measure of my motherhood is whether I've been faithful to point my kids to Christ and just care for them well. So I began to play the comparison game this week. Don't need to do that.
And I think the takeaway is a lot of stories on our part, but I think the takeaway is like find some work rest rhythms for yourselves, communicate as parents of when you need it and how to have it. For me, I said it's transition time after work. I have 15 minutes of like, hey, 20 minutes, I need to go for a drive, or I'm gonna go on the way home and I'm not calling anybody. I just need 20 minutes to make the transition, or I go fish. I gotta go out, like I gotta go fish by myself, just chill, recenter. And for moms, the same thing. Communicate where it is and take the breaks along the way. Don't just let it accumulate trying to make it through. Like find that rhythm and talk to people. Like you're in community here at church with your community group members, with moms who are in the same life stage you are, moms who are a little further along, and women who haven't had kids who have resources to help you, and grandmothers now. So you've got all the cycles. That's the benefit of living in a multi-generational community.
Good to ask for help.
We are gonna pick up our time.
Yes.
So to transition quickly to just talk about tech for a few minutes, and all the asterisks. I'm not gonna say them. Here's kind of how we've been for our crew. And when I say tech and screens, I mean all the things: TVs, iPads, phones, gaming systems, screens, like all that junk. Again, old man mode, full confession, but like we're probably on the end of the spectrum with limitation for all that. And I think that there's a couple reasons for that. I just say the majority of TV, internet content is not from a Christian worldview. That's not a way out there statement. It's not. Even the kids shows that are on there, many of them have packed agendas. And even if the kids show's good, the refresh rate, change in scene is like every 8 seconds, which is not real helpful for attention spans. Like I think even the secular research out there is showing there's problems with our screen time usage for kids. And even if we move on from that, like I think any of us would likely question about half of other adults we know their social media use, right? Like adults aren't handling social media well. Kids just don't.
Can't.
And so for us, it has been really a heavy limitation on those things. I think it starts, we've never really done the iPad tablet thing. That's not been a direction that we've gone for any of our house. We do have TV time, and I think early on, especially in like the toddler years, we kind of realized, hey, we're letting TV babysit the kids quite a bit. Like we started noticing, like,
to
get the breather and the rest that we weren't planning in, and they're going nuts at the house. We turn the TV on a lot, and they, kind of get stuck there. And we noticed a few cycles. We noticed the cycle of like once it was on, then they always wanted to watch more. And then often we found when we turned it off, they were just grumpy. I kid you not. We have one that has a physical reaction to watching TV. Like it's like you can tell. You can tell like when the TV goes off,
We
he'll
call it
get
TV cheeks.
he'll get like red flushed cheeks.
Yeah.
It's funny. But anyway, just an observation for us. Like, but we knew like okay, too much TV time, and so we kind of made an abrupt transition, and then have kind of revisited over time. One that we had Heather started a TV-free summer. Like she said, all right, we're just going to start a purge this year, and it was probably worse for me.
We still watched things after they went to bed, but our kids never saw the screen on for about 3 months, and it really did not take long for them to stop asking for it. It really didn't. And they would have been maybe like 6'3" and itty-bitty at that point.
Yeah, so for us, we realized the challenges with the TV side for them in particular, and started kind of moving away from that. Because we found even if they're watching kids shows, a lot of the commercials were awful. And you're like seeing a commercial, and then you're stuck there. Even if you're on YouTube or something else, you can't skip through it. You're stuck in it. So we're like, this isn't helpful to begin with. A lot of the content is not what we want it to be. And then we think the overall picture of influence in our kids' lives, we're like, now they're looking up to some people that I really don't want them to look up to. A lot of even the kid shows have relationship things, even between parent-kid relationships that you're like, I don't want that modeled. I think that
Sibling.
the parents always die in Disney movies, so I think that's amusing. But outside of that, but then, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. Kids are watching that a lot. They start talking about that more. So those are the types of things. And so, again, full confession here, we went like full Oompa Loompa on TV stuff. So Heather is going to contest, but I said, you've got to read the whole thing. So this is going to sound like lunacy, but I'm going to ask Heather to read the full...
Don't tell what it is.
Okay, the full song. The full song, it sounds crazy, but just listen to it.
I'm so embarrassed that I'm reading this in this setting, but this is really funny. Okay, here we go. If you get the reference, I'll be so excited. The most important thing we've learned so far as children are concerned is never, never, never let them near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. In almost every house we've been, we've watched them gaping at the screen. They'll loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they're hypnotized by it, until they're absolutely drunk with all that shock and ghastly junk. Oh yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the windowsill. They never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. But did you ever stop to think, to wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved tot? It rots the senses in the head. It kills imagination dead. It clogs and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind, he can no longer understand a fantasy, a fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. All right, you'll cry, all right, you'll say, that if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. We'll answer this by asking you, what used the darling ones to do? How used they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented? Have you forgotten? Don't you know? We'll say it very loud and slow. They used to read. They'd read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott, gadzooks. One half their lives was reading books. The nursery shelves held books galore, books cluttered up the nursery floor, and in the bedroom by the bed, more books were waiting to be read. Such wondrous, fine, fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens, and whales, and treasure isles and distant shores where smugglers rode with muffled oars, and pirates wearing purple pants, and sailing ships, and elephants, and cannibals crouching round the pot, stirring away at something hot. It smells so good, what can it be? Good gracious, it's Penelope. I told you it was dumb, we're keeping on here. The younger ones had Beatrix Potter with Mr. Todd, the dirty rotter, and Squirrel Nutkin, Pigling Bland and Mrs. Tiggywinkle and just how the camel got his hump and how the monkey lost his rump and Mr. Toad and bless my soul, there's Mr. Rat and Mr. Mole. Oh, books, what books they used to know, those children living long ago. So please, oh please, we beg, we pray, go throw your TV set away. And in its place you can install a lovely bookshelf on the wall. Then fill the shelves with lots of books, ignoring all the dirty looks, the screams and yells, the bites and kicks, and children hitting you with sticks. Fear not, because we promise you that in about a week or two of having nothing else to do, they'll now begin to feel the need of having something good to read. And once they start, oh boy, you watch the slowly growing joy that fills their hearts. They'll grow so keen, they'll wonder what they'd ever seen in that ridiculous machine, that nauseating, foul, unclean, repulsive television screen. And later, each and every kid will love you more for what you did. P.S. regarding Mike TV, we very much regret that we shall simply have to wait and see if we can get him back his height. But if we can't, it serves him right.
Reference?
You know what that is?
You know what that is? Nobody?
Yeah.
Willy Wonka.
Yeah, it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
It's the full Oompa Loompa song for Willy Wonka. So, of course, in the television version, they don't sing the whole song.
So much better in the book. I read this
Get the book,
recently
read
and
it.
my jaw dropped.
And I know it sounds crazy to read that, but we had to laugh because, honestly, that's exactly what we did. Like, we've got an upstairs and then kind of a downstairs hangout area, but in our upstairs living room, we got rid of the TV.
Before we
read this, like, we got rid of the TV completely for them. We put a bookshelf in, and through that, and Heather really fostering a love to read in the kids, it changed a lot for them. The creativity time, the play time, the self-entertainment. If she comes home with a bag of books from the library, like, they all just sit there.
We've lost them for a while.
And read on them. So I know that was a long chunk. Read it. Go read the book. The full songs are good. They drop some good wisdom in there. But, like, it changed a lot for our kids to pull that away and to just give them some time to learn to entertain themselves. I also say with that, and I think this goes for all the kids, especially the boys, but we had to lay out some places in our home for them to go all out, for them to, if they're entertaining themselves, it's going to be messy, it's going to be wild. We had to lay out some freedom places for that to happen. If you want to go crazy, here's where you go crazy. You don't go crazy through this part of the house. You have the area out here, or you go outside. Provide the space and the time for them to get a lot of that energy out. And don't just pacify it with screen usage. So, there's kind of where we went. I admit it's full on extreme on one side, but.
Yeah, you go.
All right.
What we do.
So moving to what we actually do. And we are not completely no TV in our house. We still watch a fair bit, but I'll tell you that I don't say almost. It never happens alone. Like, our kids aren't ever watching TV alone. We'll be watching a show together in the evenings. If we have a snack or something like that, we'll watch something. I watch a fair bit of YouTube as I figure out how to fix all the things I broke from previous YouTube video. Yeah. So, we do watch, but it's with them. Similar with video games. Like, we're not anti-video game, but we'll let them play video games, like a handheld machine, like in a super long car ride. We cut it out of, like, anything under a couple hours, just because, again, that became the expectation. We're going to take this with us. We want to do it. But on super long car rides, they can have a handheld one that they share and rotate. Emphasis is on playing together. I will play video games with them, or we will as a family. We set that up as saying, hey, we don't want this to be an isolating activity for you or something that you just do on your own. So the point is to not say yank it all, but I would just say really think about how you're using it, the tone you set, and be careful with the media that they're consuming when they use those things. I think both on the video game and the TV screen front. As they get younger, I mean, I'll tell you every year, and Brian, you know this way more than I do, I'm shocked at with the age of what kids come in with cell phones, like fully functioning cell phones. There are much more in-depth and great resources for this from, the class Will did. What?
Yeah, that practical parenting class that Will and Kevin did a year ago, week 4, Will goes through specific tech options. I thought I was up to date on things. I was not. I mean, so that class was super helpful. It's worth going back, especially if you have kids that are getting into the years where they're like asking for devices of any kind. He gives lots of practical resources that are out there.
So just encourage you to use discretion there. We've just avoided the cell phones at all, and just said like, no, not even a consideration until you're older. As as they've gotten into 10 to 12 and they have practices from school and that sort of thing. We've done the smartwatch with no internet access so that they can call or text us. There's flip phone options, but even, be mindful of, as your kids get to that age with the phone, who they can message with the full flip phone. The advantage we liked with some of the watches is we could limit the contact list. And listen, I'm just going to be eyes wide open, and unless you think otherwise, I think we're all there. But I mean, if you need to hear horrible stories, we have lots of people at Buck Run that work in the school system and can tell you. Like even kids sending inappropriate images of one another can hit in elementary school. 100% happens 6th, 7th, and 8th by middle school. So like, I don't want to freak you out, but hey, eyes wide open. It is happening, and that's just what's getting caught, right? So for us, that has just been a non-negotiable. There are ways that you can get them to be in contact with you when needed, and also, I struggle with my own amount of cell phone usage. Like we struggle with self-regulation as adults with that. So think about how challenging that is for a kid and where that sets them up. And again, TV usage, tablet usage, phone, it's like we started in week 1. It's what are you modeling yourself? How much your kids want a phone will largely be dependent on how much you are using your phone. If you are on it all the time, all of a sudden they're going to be like, well, that is awesome. Dad is on that thing all the time. It must be the coolest ever.
And as they get older, they'll ask, hey, what are you doing when you're on your phone? And if you know that you have kids that are old enough to notice it, you say, hey, let me show you what I'm doing when I have my phone out. And I mean, that's some accountability if we say, I'm checking my email or I'm scrolling. I mean, most of the time that's pretty embarrassing for our kids to see that we're just sitting there scrolling through things. I don't mean to call anybody out, calling me out. But yeah, as we move into our kids getting a little bit older, the goal is not to shelter them from any tech ever, because eventually they're leaving our homes, right? And we don't want a kid going to college with a smartphone and has never learned how to use this thing. We are going to teach and train how to use these devices while they're still in our home and while we still have influence. And so even backing up to like TV watching, as our kids are getting older, maybe we are expanding a little more mature content. We will just pause what we're watching and say, hey, did you hear how that kid just spoke to his parent? What do you think about that? What did you hear him say? What does God's word tell us anything about parents and kids speaking to each other that way? It's okay to just pause and bring it back to, is this God's design for the family? What does he say about how our families should look and interact? So it's not about sheltering them. It's about teaching them how we can be in this world, but not of the world, and we can still walk through cultural times and honor the Lord in that.
Yeah, and I think the importance of communication matters here. Each kid is going to feel the technological pressure a little differently. If you're pulling them out of social media early and they're on a school bus, I don't know, Brian, I mean, the 1st and 2nd graders on the school bus will have cell phones. So then you're working through with your kid, like sitting next to somebody with a cell phone, and like, we had one that's like, Dad, the bus is so boring. Like, well, don't you have anybody to talk to? Like, no, everybody's on their phone. Like, so there are lots of conversations to have around tech, not just what you're setting up an expectation in the home, but how they're dealing with it out in the world. And, we're not raising any tech geniuses in our house this way, but the last thing I'd hit on is computer usage, and just again an acknowledgement that again, I'm a bit behind the times on this, but my kids are probably on a computer more than I want them to be at school, let alone like at home. So talking through like how to appropriately use the computer at school, when they're there, the things that they're looking at and searching, the teachers do what they can, but they can't, be everywhere all the
It's
time.
not enough for us to assume that the school is guarding our kids' hearts around their computer usage.
Yeah. And same video games at school. Like we had to work through with one, we figured out on his school computer he was playing video games instead of doing his lessons. Like a lot of them have access to those things. So the encouragement on the tech is to really pay attention. If you're like me and you're a couple decades behind, even more so, like pay attention to what they're looking at and to think about as a family. Yeah, Brian.
I think one of the other tech conversations we have to have, like you mentioned, is have that conversation with our kids with how they respond when somebody else hands them a phone or is trying to show them. I mean, because we've had, even years ago, we've had kids from the neighborhood
Yeah.
that, have the iPad and they're showing, wildly inappropriate stuff to our kids, and we realize, hey, we got to have a conversation about what do you do when somebody says,
Yeah.
hey, look at what I've got on my, my iPad or my phone.
Yeah.
I think that's also an important aspect of the tech.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we miss because we're just thinking about.
No, that's super important. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, talking through what they see with others, and I'll say that this is also brings in the entirety of the conversation piece in the relationship with your kids. Talk through them. Have a conversation way earlier than you think about, hey, if somebody shows you something on their phone that doesn't make you feel right, like talk to me about
This
it.
is
Tell
what you
me
do.
what you saw. Like let's talk through that. And yeah, it will. You pray that it doesn't happen earlier than you want, but also, prep for those conversations. And I struggled with the bounds of that. All right, am I creating mystery and then wanting to look for things inappropriate, or also prepping them for like, hey, somebody, this is going to happen. And overall, we're going to get to this some more next week.
Yeah.
We're going to talk over discernment, teaching discernment, how we can do that as parents, and keep the doors open for conversation. They remind me too much that I get into monologue mode, but the older they get, the more time we've got to make for listening, the more time we've got to talk through things. For you all with toddlers, though, think about setting that up now, like setting up conversation time and that tone of that relationship, so that when they hit even the stuff in second through fifth grade, let alone middle school and high school, that you've established that relationship.
Yeah, this back to that Deuteronomy 6, that as you sit and as you lie down, these as you go conversations can become very normal in the little days, so that you've kind of built up the right to keep speaking into it as they're older.
Well, I stayed true to my word wherever the wind may take us this morning.
We
We went all over the place, but thanks for hanging with us. Let me close us in prayer. Lord, I thank you for this day that you've given us today. I thank you for just the parents in this room and their desire to just turn to you and follow you in everything that they do. Their desire to just be a mirror to point their kids to you, and their desire to lay a biblical foundation in their home. Lord, just help us to run this race well and to parent well. And thank you for all that you do. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.